Positive thinking is both a philosophy and an expression of faith. It teaches the cultivation of peace of mind, not as an escape from problems, but as a practical approach to creating a life that is personally and socially worthwhile. The way of life to which this book is a witness is very wonderful. Although the road can be a difficult one, it is also full of hope and victory and even joy. It is my sincere hope that you will take these principles to heart and discover for yourself how the power of positive thinking can truly change your life.
The greatest secret for eliminating the inferiority complex, which is another term for profound self-doubt, is to fill your mind to the overflowing with faith. Develop a tremendous faith in God, and that will give you a humble yet soundly realistic faith in yourself. And how do you acquire this dynamic faith?
Well, the answer begins with the study of the Scriptures and the use of prayer, lots of prayer. The Scriptures say, according to your faith be it unto you. The bigger your problem, the bigger your prayer should be. Drive your prayers deep into your doubts, into your fears and insecurities. Pray deep, big prayers that have plenty of strength, and you will come up with a powerful and vital faith. It is also helpful to go to a competent spiritual advisor, a minister, a priest, or a rabbi for instruction. The ability to make faith work for you is a skill, and like any skill, it must be studied and practiced to be perfected. One of the most powerful cures for self-doubt is the thought that you are not alone in this world, that Almighty God is actually with you, helping you, that He will be your companion, that He will stand by you, support you, and see you through every adversity. To practice this belief, simply affirm, God is with me, God is helping me, God is guiding me. Spend several minutes each day visualizing God's presence. Then practice believing that affirmation. Go about your business on the assumption that what you have affirmed and visualized is absolutely true. The release of power and confidence which this procedure stimulates will astonish you. Along with prayer and study of the Scriptures, another very effective way to build self-confidence is by suggesting confidence concepts to yourself. If your mind is obsessed by thoughts of insecurity and inadequacy, that is, of course, because such thoughts have dominated your thinking over a long period of time. You must give your mind a different and more positive thought pattern, and that requires discipline. In the busy activities of daily existence, the repetition of positive ideas can help re-educate the mind and make of it a power-producing plant. It is possible, even in the midst of your daily work, to drive confident thoughts into your consciousness. Let me tell you about a method one man discovered. This man once went around with the feeling that something terrible was going to happen to him, and it made his life miserable, of course. His mind was saturated with a sense of inferiority. This mental state was reflected in his business, which was doing poorly. But then he hit upon a plan which knocked all those thoughts out of his mind, a plan which allowed him to live with a sense of confidence in himself and in life. I'm a traveling salesman, he explained, and I drive around all day calling on my customers. I've discovered that while a person drives, he or she thinks all kinds of thoughts. If the pattern of thought is negative, one will think many negative thoughts during the day, And that's the way I used to be, he said. I used to drive around all day between calls with my mind full of fear and defeat. And that is one of the reasons my work was going so poorly. Then he showed me his plan. In his glove compartment, he kept a pack of small cards. He chose one and clipped it on the instrument panel of his car. It read, "If you have faith, nothing shall be impossible unto you." He pulled out another which read, "If God be for us, who can be against us?" He told me that as he drove around, he memorized these thoughts. He said, "I've learned to think differently as a result of this practice. The old insecurities that used to haunt me are just about all gone now. And instead of thinking thoughts of defeat and despair, I think thoughts of faith and courage. It is really wonderful the way this method has changed me. It has helped my business too. For how can you expect to make a sale if you approach a customer thinking you're going to fail? This plan is a very wise one. By filling his mind with affirmations of the presence, support, and help of God, this man actually changed his thought processes. He put an end to the domination of his long-held sense of insecurity. His potential powers were set free. Feelings of confidence depend upon the type of thoughts that habitually occupy your mind. If constantly you fix your attention upon dire events that might happen, the result is that you will constantly feel insecure. And what is even more serious is the tendency to create, by the power of thought, the very condition you fear. But when you fill your mind with thoughts of faith, confidence, and security, you force out all thoughts of doubt and weakness. One man I know used a process I'll repeat often in this tape. He went through the Bible and underlined every passage about courage and confidence that he could find. He then committed these lines to memory, in effect, cramming his mind full of the healthiest, happiest, and most powerful thoughts in the world. After a few weeks, the change in him was little short of remarkable. From almost complete defeat, he became an inspiring and confident personality. He now radiates courage and magnetism. He regained confidence in himself and in his own powers by a simple process of thought conditioning. Ralph Waldo Emerson declared a tremendous truth when he said, "They conquer who believe they can." He also said, "Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain." Practice confidence and faith, and your fears and insecurities will soon have no power over you.
From daily difficulties to large-scale problems, tend to dissipate energy and leave you spent and discouraged. In such a condition, your true inner power is often obscured, and it becomes easy to yield to setbacks by feeling hopeless. When you find yourself in such a state, it is important to reappraise your assets. A reasonable self-evaluation will convince you that things are not as hopeless as you think they are.
For example, a man of 52 consulted me. He was in despair. He told me that everything he had built up over his lifetime had been swept away. "Everything?" I asked sympathetically. "Everything," he repeated. "I have nothing left at all. Everything is gone. There is no hope, and I am too old to start all over again." And he said, "Sadly, I have lost all faith." Naturally, I felt sympathetic toward him, but it was evident that his chief trouble came from the dark shadows of hopelessness in his thinking. These shadows had entered into his mind and had distorted his outlook. His true powers had retreated behind this twisted thinking, leaving him without any force. So I said, suppose we take a piece of paper and on it list the values you have left. There's no use, he sighed. I haven't a single thing left. Well, I said, let's just see anyway. Now, is your wife still with you? Why, yes, of course, and she's wonderful, he added. We've been married for 30 years. She would never leave me, no matter how badly things were. All right, I said, let's put that down. Wife still with me. And how about your children? He said, actually, they've all told me that they love me and will stand by me. They are wonderful. Well, then, that is number 2. Children love you and will stand by you. Have you any friends? Yes, he said, I really have some fine friends who've offered to help. They've been very generous, but what can they do? So I wrote down number 3, fine friends who hold you in esteem. How about your integrity, your standing in the community? Oh, okay. I've always tried to do the right thing. Well, let's put that down as number 4, integrity, good standing. How about your health? My health is okay, I'm glad to say. Number 5, then, is good physical health. How about the United States? Do you still think it's the best place to do business and is the land of opportunity? Well, you and me both agree that it's the only country in the world we'd want to live in, he replied. Well, then that's number 6. You live in the USA, land of opportunity, and you're glad to be here. Then I asked, how about your religious faith? Do you believe in God and that God will help you? Yes, he admitted, I don't think I could have gotten through this at all if I hadn't had some help from God. At this point, I read him the assets we'd listed. Then I shoved it across the table to him. Take a look at that, I said. You've got quite a total of assets there. I thought you told me everything had been swept away. He grinned sheepishly. I guess I never thought of the situation that way. Perhaps things aren't so bad at that, he said pensively. Maybe I can start all over again. If I could just get some confidence, if I could just get the feel of some power inside me. Well, in time, he did get that feeling, and he did start all over again. But he did so only when he changed his viewpoint, his mental attitude. It was faith that swept away his doubts and gave him more than enough power to overcome all of his difficulties. And I must admit, he had plenty
illustrates a profound
at the time.
truth, that attitudes are more important than facts. Anything facing us, however difficult, is not as important as our attitude towards it. The secret to rising above most difficulties is simply to gain a more balanced view, with a slant that is weighted a bit on the positive side.
So if you feel you are defeated and have lost confidence in your ability to win, tell you what you do. Take a piece of paper and make a list, not of the factors that are against you, but of those that are for you. If anyone thinks constantly of opposing forces, those forces will get built up until they assume a formidable strength, which they actually don't possess. But if you mentally visualize and affirm and reaffirm your assets, you will rise out of even the most awesome difficulty. Your inner powers will reassert themselves, and with the help of God, lift you from defeat to victory.
To help you start building up your self-confidence, here are 7 suggestions. 1. Create a mental picture of yourself as a success. Hold on to this picture tenaciously. Never permit it to fade. Since your mind tries to complete what it pictures, always picture success, no matter how badly things seem to be going at the moment. Whenever a negative thought about your personal power comes to mind, deliberately voice a positive thought to cancel it out. 2. Don't build up obstacles in your imagination. Minimize them instead. Problems should be seen for what they are and never inflated by fearful thoughts. 3. Don't be awestruck by other people or try to copy them. Remember that most people, despite a confident appearance, are often as scared and as doubtful of themselves as you are. 4. Get a competent counselor to help you understand the origin of your feelings of inferiority and self-doubt. These feelings often begin in childhood. Self-knowledge leads to a cure. 5. Each day, practice the following affirmation. Repeat it out loud if possible. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Here's another dynamic affirmation. If God be for us, who can be against us? 6. Make what you think is a true estimate of your own ability, then raise it 10%. Don't become egotistical, but develop a wholesome self-respect. Believe in your own God-released powers. 7. Put yourself in God's hands. To do that, simply state, I am in God's hands. Then believe you are now receiving all the power you need. Affirm that the kingdom of God is within you, in the form of adequate power to meet all of life's demands. Remind yourself that God is with you and there is nothing that can defeat him. Now, Dr. Peale illustrates an important fact about human nature. You can think your way to failure and misery, but you can also think your way to success and happiness. Because thoughts are real and dynamic, learning to harness their power is a crucial step in creating a life of your own choosing.
Some years ago, I was working with a group of people to establish a nonprofit inspirational magazine. At one point, our endeavor was faced with severe financial problems. In other words, it was almost broke. And when it seemed almost impossible to keep going, I called a meeting. I invited a woman who had once contributed a nice sum to this magazine, hoping that lightning might strike twice in the same place. But this time, she said she would give us something of greater value than money. This rather surprised us, for under the circumstances, we couldn't think of anything more valuable than money. When she told us she was going to give us a creative idea, we didn't jump with enthusiasm. All we could think was, how can we pay our bills with an very strong tendency for that picture to actualize as fact and become reality. To assure something worthwhile happening, therefore, first pray about it and test it according to God's will. Then print a picture of it on your mind as happening, holding that image firmly in consciousness. Continue to check that picture to God's will, that is to say, put the matter in God's hands and follow God's guidance. Work hard and intelligently, thus doing your part to achieve success in the matter. Practice believing and continue to hold the picture firmly in your thoughts. Do this, and you will be astonished at the ways in which that which is visualized comes to pass. A woman became aware she and her husband were drifting apart. Theirs had been a happy marriage, but the wife became preoccupied with social affairs, and the husband had gotten super busy. Before they knew it, the old-time close companionship was gone. Then, one day, she discovered his interest in another woman. At this, she lost her head and became hysterical. When she consulted her minister, he listened to her tale and then turned the conversation to herself. She admitted that she had become self-centered, sharp-tongued, and nagging. She then confessed that she had never felt herself the equal of her husband. Her sense of inferiority had made her retreat actually into antagonism. The minister suggested that she create an image of herself as capable and attractive. He whimsically told her that God runs a beauty parlor and that faith techniques could put beauty on a person's face and charm and ease in their manner. He gave her instruction in how to pray and how to spiritually picturize. He also advised her to hold a mental image of the goodness of her husband and of being once again in harmony and companionship with him. She was to hold this picture tenaciously with faith. Soon after this, her husband informed her that he wanted a divorce. She had conquered herself enough by now to receive this request with calmness. She replied that she was willing if he wanted it, but suggested they defer the decision for 90 days. If he still wanted a divorce at the end of this period, she would cooperate with him. Night after night he went out, and night after night she sat at home. But now she pictured him as seated in his old chair. She painted an image of him there, comfortably reading as in the old days. She visualized him puttering around the house, painting and fixing things as he used to do. She visualized the two of them playing golf together and taking hikes as they once did. She maintained this picture with steady faith, and one night, what do you know? There he actually sat in his old chair. She looked twice to be sure that it was the reality rather than the picturization, but perhaps a picturization is a reality, for at any rate, the actual man was actually there. After that night, he still went out occasionally, but more and more frequently, he sat in his chair. Then he began to read to her, as in the old days. Finally, one sunny Saturday afternoon, he asked, "What do you say to a game of golf?" The days went by pleasantly until she realized that the 90th day had arrived. That evening she said quietly, "Bill, this is the 90th day." "What do you mean?" he asked, puzzled. "The 90th day. Why, don't you remember? We agreed to wait 90 days to settle that divorce matter, and this is the day." He looked at her for a moment, and then, hidden behind his paper, he casually turned a page and said, "Don't be silly. I couldn't possibly get along without you. Where did you get the idea I would ever leave you?" The New Testament says the kingdom of God is within you. It is informing us that God has provided us with all the potential abilities we need. It is up to us to tap and develop those powers. A man I know is the chief of 4 executives in a successful company. At regular intervals, these men have idea sessions. The purpose of these meetings is to tap all the creative ideas lurking in the minds of any of the 4. For this session, they use a room without telephones, buzzers, or other usual office equipment. Before starting this session, the group spends 10 minutes in silent prayer and meditation. They conceive of God as creatively at work in their minds. Each prays and meditates silently in his own way. Following the quiet period, all start talking, pouring out ideas that have come to their minds. Memos of the ideas are written on cards and thrown on the table. No one is permitted to criticize any idea at this point, for they believe that argument can stop the flow of creative thought. The cards are gathered up to be evaluated at a later session, which follows this idea-tapping session, where thinking is stimulated by prayer power. As one of the executives explained, we've come up with insights that not only show on our bottom line, but which have given us a new feeling of confidence. Beyond that, a deeper feeling of fellowship among the 4 of us has grown, and this has spread to others as well. Alert people everywhere are finding that by trying prayer power, they feel better, work better, sleep better, are better. A young woman came to me a while ago and admitted that she was filled with hate, jealousy, and resentment. She was also very apprehensive, always worrying about her children, that they would be sick or get into an accident or fail in school or something. Her life was an unhappy mixture of fear and worry. I told her that the practice of creative prayer could change her life. I suggested that she pray every day at the time the children were coming home from school and make her prayers an affirmation of God's protective care. Doubtful at first, she became a most enthusiastic practitioner of prayer. Here's what she wrote to me. My greatest progress dates from the time you told me that every day is a good day if you pray. I began to put into practice the idea of affirming that this would be a good day the minute I woke up in the morning, and I can positively say that I haven't had a bad or upsetting day since that time. The amazing thing is that my days actually haven't been any smoother or any more free from petty annoyances than they ever were, but they just don't seem to have the power to upset me anymore. Every night I begin my prayers by listing all the things for which I am grateful, little things that added to the joy of the day. I know that this habit has geared my mind to pick out the nice things and forget the unpleasant ones. The fact that for 6 weeks I have not had a single bad day and have refused to get downhearted with anyone is really
People
marvelous
find tremendous
to me.
power each day through prayer. Here are 10 suggestions for achieving effective results from your prayers. 1. Set aside a few minutes each day. Do not say anything. Simply practice thinking about God. This will make your mind spiritually receptive. 2. Pray out loud using simple, natural words. Tell God anything that's on your mind. Talk to God in your own language. 3. Pray as you go about the business of the day, on the subway or bus or at your desk. Begin by closing your eyes to shut out the world and concentrate briefly on God's presence. 4. Don't always ask for something when you pray, but instead affirm that God's blessings are being given and spend most of your prayers offering thanks. 5. Pray with the belief that sincere prayers can reach out and surround your loved ones with God's love and protection. 6. Never use a negative thought in prayer. Only positive thoughts get results. 7. Always express willingness to accept God's will. Ask for what you want, but be open to take what God gives you. It may be better than what you ask for. 8. Practice the attitude of putting everything into God's hands. Ask for the ability to do your best and then leave the results confidently to God. 9. Pray for people you do not like or who have mistreated you. Resentment is the first obstacle to spiritual power. 10. Make a list of people for whom to pray. The more you pray for others, especially those not connected with you, the more the good results of prayer will come back to you. Some people, it seems, always have an extra dash of energy for just about any task they want to undertake. What's the secret? How do they do it? In this lesson, entitled Tune Into the Infinite, Dr. Peale talks about the source of all energy and how to tap into its boundless power.
A Major League Baseball pitcher once played a long game when the temperature was over 100 degrees. He lost several pounds as a result of the afternoon's exertion, and at one stage of the game his energy was severely depleted. But this man had a unique method for restoring energy. He simply repeated a passage from the Old Testament. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. The pitcher completed the game with energy to spare. He explained the technique by saying, I sent a powerful energy-producing thought through my mind. As this baseball player discovered, prayer has the power to alter not only our attitudes, but our energy level as well. How we think we feel physically has a definite effect on how we actually feel. If your mind tells you that you're tired, the nerves and the muscles accept that as a fact. If your mind is intensely interested in something, you can keep on with an activity indefinitely. In the same way, our spiritual life functions through our thoughts, especially when we pray. When you tell yourself that you have powerful internal resources, you supply attitudes of faith to your mind. Such attitudes increase your energy and your well-being. A man full of vitality and vigor says that he goes to church regularly to get his batteries recharged. His concept is sound. God is the source of all energy. Atomic energy, electrical energy, spiritual energy. Indeed, every form of energy derives from the Creator. The Bible emphasizes this point when it says, He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might He increaseth strength. And here's how the Bible describes life's energizing and re-energizing process. In Him we live and move and have our being. In other words, from God we receive our vitality and our dynamic energy, and through Him we attain completeness. Contact with God establishes within us a flow of the same type of energy that recreates the world, that renews springtime every year. When we're in spiritual contact with God through our thoughts, divine energy flows through us and automatically renews the original creative act. It's not unlike an electric clock connected to an outlet. The clock continues to keep time until it's unplugged. Then it stops because it has lost contact with its source of power. When we lose contact with our divine source of energy, much the same thing happens. We can tap into a reservoir of boundless power, and from this source we can draw on unlimited energy for body and mind. A friend of mine, a man whose responsibilities are very heavy, works from morning until night without interruption, but this fellow always seems able to assume new obligations. Most importantly, he has the knack of handling his work easily and efficiently. One day I happened to be talking with his physician, and I commented that I hoped this man wasn't setting a dangerous pace that could lead to a breakdown. The doctor shook his head. "No," he replied, "I don't think there's any danger of a crack-up. The reason is that he's a thoroughly well-organized individual with no energy leaks in his makeup. He handles things with easy power and carries burdens without strain. He never wastes an ounce of energy. Every effort is applied with maximum force." When asked to account for this seemingly boundless energy and efficiency, the physician stated, "He's emotionally well integrated, and what's more important, he is a soundly religious person. His religion provides him with a workable mechanism for preventing energy leaks. It isn't hard work that drains off energy, but emotional guilt feelings, where the patients unconsciously attempted to compensate by hectic overwork. Then they attributed their breakdown not to a sense of guilt, but to their overworked condition. This doctor told me that such a breakdown needn't happen if only the patient could be released from his guilt. Under such circumstances, peace of mind can be found by yielding the guilt as well as the tension it produces to the healing therapy of God. An acquaintance at a quiet resort hotel. This was a high-pressured, hard-driving, and exceedingly nervous businessman. I found him sitting in the sun in a deck chair and said I was glad to see him relaxing in such a beautiful spot. Nervously, he replied, "I haven't any business being here. I have so much work to do at home. I'm under terrible pressure. I'm nervous, jumpy, I can't sleep. My wife insisted that I come down here for a week. The doctors say there's nothing wrong with me that right thinking and relaxation can't cure. But how in the world do I do that? I would do anything to get a sense of quiet inside myself." We talked a bit, and it came out that he was always worrying that something sinister was going to happen. For years, he had lived in a constant state of apprehension about something happening to his wife or his children or his home. It was not difficult to analyze this case. His trouble rose from a double source, from childhood insecurities and from later guilty experiences. His mother had always felt that something was going to happen, and he absorbed her anxiety feelings. Later, he committed some sins, and his subconscious mind insisted upon self-punishment. As a result of this unhappy combination, he was now suffering from a highly inflamed state of nervousness. Finishing our conversation, I stood beside his chair a moment. There was no one near, so I rather hesitantly suggested, "Would you by any chance like me to pray with you?" He nodded, and I put my hand on his shoulder and prayed. "Dear Jesus, as you healed people in the long ago and gave them peace, heal this man now. Give him fully of thy forgiveness, and help him to forgive himself. Separate him from all his sins, and let him know that you do not hold them against him. Set him entirely free from them. Then let thy peace flow into his mind, into his soul, and into his body." He looked up at me with a strange expression on his face, and then turned away, for there were tears in his eyes. Months later, I ran into him in New York, and he said, "Something happened to me that day when you prayed for me. I felt a strange sense of quietness and peace," and he added, "healing." This man now goes to church regularly and reads the Bible every day. He follows the laws of God and has a great deal of driving force. This is a healthy, happy man, for now he has peace in his heart and in his mind.
If you are having trouble finding peace of mind, here are a few exercises. 1. Every day, put aside 15 minutes for yourself when you can find absolute silence. Go alone into a quiet place and sit or lie down. Think as little as possible. Allow the silence to open you up to feelings of harmony and beauty. 2. From time to time during the day, practice concentrating on a selected series of peaceful thoughts. Think of your past as a painting from which you can choose the most serene moments you have ever experienced. Allow your mind to dwell in those scenes until you feel you are present in that place and absorbing its tranquility. 3. Practice the technique of repeating beautiful words out loud. Words have profound powers of suggestion, and there is healing in the very saying of them. 4. The words of the Bible are especially therapeutic. Drop them into your mind, allowing them to dissolve in your consciousness, replacing negative thoughts. When your daily pace is a frantic one, it's more important than ever to remember that peace of mind is essential to efficiency, no matter what you do. Dr. Peale's prescription for accomplishing more in your life is to relax for easy power through the healing properties of calmness and quiet.
Do you ever fume and fret? Here is a picture of yourself if you do. The word fume means to boil up, to blow off, to be agitated. It conjures up images of someone who is seething and distraught. The word fret is equally descriptive. It is reminiscent of a sick child in the night, a petulant and irritating half-cry, half-whine. To fret is a term usually used when talking about children, but unfortunately it frequently describes the emotional reaction of many adults. The Bible advises us to fret not thyself. This is sound advice for people of our time. If we are to have power to live effectively, we just need to stop fuming and fretting and find instead real peace of mind. But how do you go about doing that? A first step is to reduce your pace, or at least the tempo of your pace. We don't usually realize how fast we're driving ourselves. Many people destroy their bodies by this pace, but even worse, they tear their minds and souls to shreds as well. The pace at which we live is determined by our thinking habits. It's possible for someone to live a quiet, physical existence and yet maintain a fast tempo emotionally. When the mind goes rushing on pell-mell from one feverish attitude to another, it becomes feverish too. This overstimulation produces fatigue, frustration, and emotional illness. And if this effect is so physically and emotionally pronounced, imagine what it does to that deep inner essence of the personality known as the soul. It is impossible to have peace of soul if one's tempo is so feverishly accelerated. God simply won't go that fast. He will not endeavor to keep up with you. He says, in effect, go ahead if you must with this foolish pace, and when you are worn out, I will offer you my healing. But I can make your life rich if only you will slow down and live and move and have your being in me. God moves imperturbably, slowly, and with perfect organization. The only wise rate at which to live is at God's rate. God gets things done, and they are done right, and He does them without hurrying. He neither fumes nor frets. He is peaceful and therefore very efficient. This same peace is offered to us. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Sometimes I wonder if this generation isn't so accustomed to tension and noise that many aren't comfortable without it. The deep quietness of woods and valleys, so well known to our forefathers, is almost an alien state to them. It seems that the tempo of their lives doesn't allow them to draw upon the marvelous sources of peace and quietness that the physical world offers. One summer afternoon, my wife and I went for a long walk in the woods. We were stopping at a beautiful lake mountain house, which is set in one of the finest natural parks in this country, 7,500 acres of virgin mountainside, in the middle of which is a lake that is set like a gem in the forest. Here you come out of the deep woods onto some noble promontory and rest your eyes on great valleys set among hills, rock-ribbed and ancient as the sun. These woods, mountains, and valleys constitute what ought to be a sure retreat from every confusion in this world. On this afternoon as we walked, there was a mixture of summer showers and sunlit hours. We were drenched and started to fret about it a bit because it took the press out of our clothes. Then we told each other that it doesn't hurt a human being to get drenched with clean rainwater, that the rain feels cool and fresh on one's face, and that you can always sit in the sun and dry yourself out. So we walked under the trees and talked, and then fell silent. We were listening deeply to the quietness. In the strict sense, the woods are never still. There is tremendous activity always in the process. But on this beautiful afternoon, nature's sounds were quiet, harmonious. Nature was laying its hand of healing quietness upon us, and we could actually feel the tension being drawn off. Just as we were falling under this spell, the faint sounds of something passing for music came to us. It was a nervous, high-strung music, so popular these days. And presently through the woods came 3 young people, and one of them was lugging a portable radio. City people out for a walk in the woods, and tragically enough were bringing their noise along with them. They were nice folk, too, for they stopped and we had a pleasant talk with them. It occurred to me to ask them to turn that thing off and listen to the music of the woods. But I didn't feel it was my business to instruct them, and finally they went on their way. We commented on the loss they were incurring, that they could pass through this peacefulness and not give ear to the music that is as old as the world, harmony and melody the like of which man has never equaled, the song of the wind through the trees, the sweet notes of birds singing their hearts out, the whole background of the music of the spheres. Remember the words of Jesus, "Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while." Frequently enough, I've had to remind myself to practice this truth. But we must discipline ourselves to quietness if we expect its benefits in our lives. To help reduce the tension that seems to dominate people everywhere, you can start by reducing your pace. To do that, you will need to slow down and quiet down. Do not fume. Do not fret. Practice being peaceful. Practice the peace of God, which passeth all understanding. Then note the quiet sense of power that wells up within you. A physician gave some rather unusual advice to a patient of his, one of those aggressive, go-getter types of businessman. This man had been telling him that he takes his briefcase home with him every night, packed with important work that must get done right away. When the doctor asked if someone else couldn't help him with it, the man snapped, "Nope, I'm the only one who can do it. Everything depends on me." The doctor asked, "If I write a prescription, will you follow it?" This, believe it or not, was the prescription. His patient was to take off 2 hours every working day and go for a long walk. Then he was to take off a half day a week and spend that half day in a cemetery. In astonishment, the patient demanded, "Why should I spend a half day in a cemetery?" "Because," answered the doctor, "I want you to wander around and look at the gravestones of men who are there permanently. I want you to meditate on the fact that many of them are there because they thought, even as you do, that the whole world rested on their shoulders. Meditate on the solemn fact that when you get there permanently, the world will go on just the same. There are times when it is essential to check our headlong pace, and it must be emphasized that the only way to stop is to stop. Believe me, I know personally from a certain city to give a lecture and was met at the plane by a committee. I was rushed to a bookstore where I had an autographing party, and then to another bookstore where another autographing party was held. Then they rushed me to a luncheon. After rushing through the luncheon, I was rushed to a meeting. After the meeting, I was rushed back to the hotel, where I changed my clothes and was rushed back to a reception, where I met several hundred people and drank 3 glasses of fruit punch. Then I was rushed back to the hotel and told I had 20 minutes to dress for dinner. When I was getting dressed, the phone rang and somebody said, "Hurry, hurry, we must rush down to dinner." Excitedly, I chattered, "I will rush right down." I rushed from the room and was so excited that I could scarcely get the key into the lock. Hastily, I checked myself to make sure I was completely dressed and rushed toward the elevator. All of a sudden, I stopped. I was out of breath. I asked myself, just what is this all about? What is the meaning of this ceaseless rush? This is ridiculous. Then I declared independence and said, I don't care if I go to dinner or not. I do not care whether I make a speech. I do not have to go to this dinner, and I do not have to give a speech. So deliberately and slowly I walked back to my room and took my time about opening the door. I telephoned the man downstairs and said, if you want to eat, go ahead. If you want to save a place for me, I will be down after a while when I'm good and ready. But I'm not going to rush anymore. So I They kept busy. 2, they used moderation in all things. 3, they ate lightly and simply. 4, they got a great deal of fun out of life. 5, they were early to bed and early to rise. 6, they were free from worry and fear, especially the fear of death. 7, they had serene minds and faith in God. Have you ever heard a person say, "I'm almost sick with worry," and then add with a laugh, "But I guess worry never really makes you ill"? But that is where they are wrong. Worry can make you ill. The problem is we worry not only with our minds, but with our hearts, brains, and every other part of ourselves. No matter what the cause of worry and fear, its effect can be noted in the cells, tissues, and organs. But don't be discouraged. There is a remedy that will bring you sure relief. You can overcome your worries. The first step is simply believing you can. For whatever you believe you can do, with God's help, you can do. Here, then, is a practical procedure which will help to eliminate abnormal worry from your daily life. Practice emptying the mind daily. This is a suggestion I will repeat over and over again, for it is of utmost importance. To avoid retaining worries in your mind while you sleep, this mental catharsis should be done preferably before retiring at night. The last 5 minutes before going to sleep are of extraordinary importance, for in that brief period the mind is most receptive to suggestion. It tends to absorb the last ideas that are entertained in the waking state. Then while you sleep, thoughts sink into the subconscious. This process of mind letting is important in overcoming worry because fearful thoughts can clog the mind and impede the flow of mental and spiritual power. But if such thoughts are eliminated daily, they will not accumulate. To help drain away these thoughts, you might use a process of creative imagination, in which you conceive of yourself as actually emptying your mind of all anxiety and fear. Think of the remarkable imaginative skill of small children. Watch how they respond to the game of kissing away a hurt. Imagination is not simply the use of fantasy. The word imagination comes from the idea of imaging, that is, creating images in our mind. Imagineering is the use of mental images to build factual results, and it is an astonishingly effective procedure. What you create with your imagination, whether it is an image of fear or of release from fear, may ultimately become a fact if it is held in your mind with sufficient faith. Here's one method you might use. Picture all your worry thoughts flowing out from you in the same way that water flows from a basin by removing the stopper. During this visualization, repeat the following affirmation. With God's help, I am now emptying my mind of all anxiety, all fear, all sense of insecurity. Repeat this slowly 5 times. Then add, I believe that my mind is now emptied of all anxiety, all fear, all sense of insecurity. Repeat the statement 5 times while holding a mental picture of your mind as being emptied. Then thank God for thus freeing you from fear, and then go to sleep. The curative process. Use this method mid-morning, and mid-afternoon as well as bedtime. Go into some quiet place for 5 minutes for this purpose. Do this faithfully, and you will soon know its beneficial results. In due course, this thinking will drive out worry. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of freeing your mind from worry and fear. Fear something over a long period of time, and there is a real possibility that you may actually help bring it to pass. The Bible contains a line which is one of the most terrible statements ever made, terrible in its truth. It's this: "For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me." Of course it will. For if you fear something continuously, you tend to create conditions in your mind that encourage its development. Faith is the one power against which fear cannot stand. Master faith, and you will automatically master fear. As the Bible also suggests, that which I have greatly believed has come upon me. In many different ways, the Bible tells us that if we have faith, nothing is impossible. So if you shift your mind from fear to faith, you will stop creating the object of your fear and will instead create the object of your faith. In the campaign against the worry habit, here's a useful strategy. The vast tree of worry which has grown up in your personality over long years can best be handled by making it as small as possible. First, snip off the little worries and expressions of worry. For example, reduce the number of worry words in your conversation. Words may be the result of worry, but they also create worry. When a worry thought comes to mind, immediately remove it with a faith expression. For example, instead of saying, "I'm worried that I will miss the train," put the worry out of your mind with a prayer and get started a little earlier. The less worrying you do, the more likely you are to be well organized, for the uncluttered mind is systematic and better able to regulate time. A friend of mine says that every morning before he gets up, he repeats the words, "I believe," 3 times. Thus, at the day's beginning, he conditions his mind to faith, and it never leaves the conviction that by faith he is going to overcome his problems and difficulties during the day. He starts the day with creative, positive thinking in his mind. He believes, and it is very hard to hold back the person who believes. Many people fail to overcome troubles such as worry because they allow a problem to seem complicated. It can be very useful to attack the problem with some simple technique, something that dramatizes your war against worry I've seen was developed by a man who was once a tremendous worrier. At one point, he was worrying himself into a bad state of nerves and ill health. He suffered from continual doubt about whether or not he had done or said the right thing. He was always rehashing his decisions and getting unnerved about them. I suggested that he ought to work out some simple method that would help him drop the day completely when it was over and go ahead into the future. One day, I noticed that his state of mind was improving, and I commented on it. "Oh, yes," he said, "I finally got the secret, and it has worked amazingly well." He asked me to drop into his office sometime during the close of the day, and he would show me how he had broken the worry habit. One evening I did, and he explained that he'd worked out a little ritual to perform every night before leaving his office. We picked up our hats and coats and started toward the door. By the door stood a wastebasket, and above it on the wall was a calendar. You could see only one date at a time, and that date was in large print. He said, "Now I will perform my evening ritual, the one that has helped me break the worry habit." He reached up and tore off the calendar page for that day. He rolled it into a small ball, and I watched with fascination as his fingers slowly opened and he dropped that day into the wastebasket. He then closed his eyes and his lips moved. Upon finishing his prayer, he said, "Amen. Okay, the day is over. Come on, let's go out and enjoy ourselves." As we walked down the street, I asked, "Would you mind telling me what you said in that prayer?" He laughed and said, "I don't think it is your kind of prayer." "Well, I pray something like this: Lord, you gave me this day. I didn't ask for it, but I was glad to have it. I did the best I could with it, and you helped me, and I thank you. I made some mistakes. That was when I didn't follow your advice, and I'm sorry about that. Forgive me. But I had some victories and some successes too, and I'm very grateful for your guidance. But now, Lord, mistakes or successes, victories or defeats, the day is over, and I'm through with it. So I'm giving it back to you. Amen." Well, perhaps that isn't an orthodox prayer, but it certainly proved to be an effective one. He dramatized the finishing of the day, and he set his face to the future, expecting to do better tomorrow. When the day is over, God blacks it out by bringing down the curtain of night. This man cooperated with God's method, and his past mistakes and failures gradually lost their hold on him. He was released from the worries that accumulated from his yesterdays. His anti-worry formula is also described in these words from the Bible: "But this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus."
To help you break the worry habit, here are some practical suggestions you can start using right away. 1. Say to yourself, "Worry is a very bad mental habit. I can change any habit with God's help." 2. You can become free of worry by practicing the opposite and stronger habit of faith. With all the strength and perseverance you can command, start practicing faith. 3. How do you practice faith? Here's a good way to begin. First thing every morning before you rise, say out loud, "I believe." 4. Recite this prayer frequently. I place this day, my life, my loved ones, my work in the Lord's hands. There is no harm in the Lord's hands, only good. Whatever happens, whatever results, if I am in the Lord's hands, it is His will, and it is good. 5. Practice saying something positive about everything. For example, don't say, "This is going to be a terrible day." Instead, affirm, "This is going to be a glorious day." Don't say, "I'll never be able to do that." Instead, affirm, "With God's help, I will do that." 6. Shoot an injection of faith into all your conversations. A group of people talking pessimistically can infect every person in the group with negative feelings. But by talking up rather than down, you can drive off that depressing atmosphere and make everyone feel hopeful. 7. One reason you're a worrier is because your mind is literally saturated with thoughts of gloom, defeat, and apprehension. To counteract these, mark every passage in the Bible that speaks of faith, hope, and happiness. Commit each to memory. Say them over and over again until they saturate your subconscious mind. Then the subconscious will return to you what you have given it, namely optimism, not worry. 8. Help others cure the worry habit. In helping another to overcome worry, you get greater power over it within yourself. 9. Every day of your life, conceive of yourself as living in partnership and companionship with God. If He actually walked by your side, would you be worried and afraid? Well then, say to yourself, He is with me. For most people, happiness is perhaps the most precious commodity in the world, and yet, all too often, it eludes us. In this segment called Create Your Own Happiness, you'll discover why happiness is really a state of mind.
Once I met a man who absolutely bubbled over with radiant happiness. When I asked him his secret, he said, "Why, it's just as plain as the nose on your face. When I get up in the morning, I realize I have two choices, either to be happy or unhappy. And what do you think I do? I just choose to be happy, and that's all there is to it." Now, that may seem a superficial response, but I recall that Abraham Lincoln, who nobody could accuse of being superficial, said that people were just about as happy as they made their minds up to be. Perhaps the easiest thing in the world to find is a way of being unhappy. Just choose unhappiness. Go around telling yourself that things aren't going well, that nothing is satisfactory, and you can be quite sure of being unhappy. But say to yourself, things are going nicely, life is good, I choose happiness, and you can be quite sure of having your choice. Children are much more adept at finding happiness than most adults. The adult who can carry the spirit of a child into middle and old age is a kind of genius, for he will preserve the truly happy honesty and may also involve the help of a professional counselor. The scratchy elements of your personality may be qualities you've acquired over the years. Perhaps you assumed them as a defense, or they may be the result of attitudes developed in your younger days. Regardless of their origin, they can be eliminated. To us seeking help for problems with personal relationships. He was about 35 years old, and such an appealing-looking man it seems surprising that people shouldn't like him. Yet he proceeded to outline an unhappy set of circumstances to illustrate his dismal failure with people. "I do my best," he said. "I've tried to put into practice the rules I've been taught about getting along with people, but I get nowhere with the effort. People just don't like me." After talking with him, the trouble became apparent. His manner of speech conveyed a persistently critical attitude. This attitude was thinly veiled, but still it was there. He had an unattractive way of pursing his lips, which indicated a kind of primness or reproof for everybody, as if he felt just a bit superior and disdainful. "Isn't there some way to change myself so people will like me?" he demanded. "Isn't there some way I can stop unconsciously rubbing people the wrong way?" The young man was decidedly self-centered and egotistical. The person he really liked was himself. Every statement, every attitude was unconsciously measured in terms of how it made him look. He was irritable with people and picked on them in his own mind, though few outward conflicts developed. Inwardly, he was trying to make everyone over to suit himself. Unconsciously, people realized this. In their minds, they erected barriers against him. Since he was being unpleasant to people in his thoughts, it followed that he was less than warm in his behavior. He was polite enough and managed not to be boorish and unpleasant, but people unconsciously felt coolness in him, so they gave him the brush off, and with good reason, for in his mind he had already brushed them off. In a sense, he liked himself too well, and to build up his self-esteem, he put others down. He was suffering from too much self-love. To change his situation, he had to be taught how to love other people and to forget himself, which was, of course, a complete reversal of his habits. He was bewildered and baffled when his difficulty was outlined to him. But since he was sincere and meant business, he practiced his suggested techniques for developing love of others in place of extreme self-love. It took some fundamental changes to accomplish this goal, since his egotism was so deeply ingrained. But in the end, he did succeed. Suggested was that he make a list of people he had met during the day, for example, the bus driver or the newsboy. Every night before retiring, he was to mentally picture each person on the list, and as he brought each face up before him, he was to think a kindly thought about that person and then pray for them. Each of us has his own world, people we encounter each day or with whom we do business. This man was instructed to pray for those in his own little world. For example, the first person he saw each morning was the elevator man in his apartment house. Normally, he'd say a perfunctory good morning. Now he took the time to have a little chat. He asked the elevator man about his family and about his interests. He found that he had an interesting point of view and some experiences which were quite fascinating. He began to see new values in a person who had previously been a mechanical robot to him. He actually began to like the elevator operator, and in turn, the elevator operator, who had formed a pretty accurate opinion of the young man, began to reverse his views. They established a friendly relationship. So the process went from person to person on his list. One day the young man said, "I've found that the world is filled with interesting people, and I never realized it before." When he made that observation, he proved that he was losing himself. And when he did that, as the Bible so wisely tells us, he found himself. In losing himself, he found himself and lots of new friends besides. People began to like him. Learning to pray for other people is a very important step in this process. When you pray for someone, you tend to lift the relationship to a higher level. The best in other people begins to flow out toward you as your best flows toward them. In the meeting of the best, in each, a higher understanding is established. Essentially, getting people to like you is merely the other side of liking them. One of the most popular men who lived in the United States in this century was the late Will Rogers, and one of the most characteristic statements he ever made was, "I never met a man I didn't like." Now, that may have been a slight exaggeration, but I'm sure Will Rogers didn't think so. That is truly the way he felt about people, and as a result, people opened up to him like flowers to the sun. Another important way to get people to like you is to practice building up their ego. Everyone has a normal desire for feelings of self-importance. If I deflate your ego, and therefore your self-importance, I show my lack of respect for you. Though you may laugh it off, I have indeed wounded you. And while you may exercise charity toward me, unless you are finely developed spiritually, you're not going to like me very much. On the other hand, if I elevate your self-respect and contribute to your feelings of personal worth, I am showing high esteem for your ego. I have helped you to be your best self, and in return, you appreciate my efforts. You are grateful to me. You like me for it. Almost anyone that you help to build up and become a better person will give you his devotion. Build up as many people as you can, but do it sincerely and unselfishly. Do it because you like them and because you recognize their potential. If you do good for people, affection and esteem will flow back to you. Best of all, you will never lack
principles for getting
for
people
friends.
to like you are simple. Here are 10 practical exercises to help you become someone that you'd like to know. 1. A person's name is very important. When you meet someone, try to remember their name. If you don't, they may feel you're not very interested in them. 2. Be the comfortable sort of person with whom others feel relaxed. Try to make them feel at home with you. 3. Acquire that quality of relaxed easygoingness so that everyday irritations don't ruffle you. 4. Don't be egotistical. Guard against giving the impression that you know it all. 5. Try to be an interesting person. Cultivate interests to keep your mind alive. People enjoy being with someone who is stimulating. 6. Get those scratchy elements out of your personality. If you suspect there may be bothersome traits you're not aware of, Get a friend or perhaps a professional to help you. 7. Attempt to heal the misunderstandings you've had with others. Sincerely drain off your grievances. 8. Practice liking people until it comes naturally to you. 9. Never miss an opportunity to say a word of congratulations upon someone's achievement or express sympathy for their sorrow or disappointment. 10. Strengthen your spiritual life. Then offer strength to others that will help them meet life more effectively. Give strength to people, and they will give affection to you.
Winston Churchill once wrote about the great British General Tudor. He commanded a division of the British Fifth Army, which faced the powerful German assault in March 1918. The odds were heavily against him, but General Tudor knew how to meet an apparently immovable and undefeatable obstacle. His method was simple. He merely stood and let the obstacle break on him, and he in turn broke the obstacle. Now here is what Churchill said about General Tudor. The impression I had of Tudor was of an iron peg hammered into the frozen ground, immovable. General Tudor knew how to stand up to an obstacle. Just stand up to it, that's all. Don't whine or complain about it. Don't give way under it. Stand up to it, and it will finally break. You will break it. Something has to break, and it won't be you. It will be the obstacle. People who cringe in front of their challenges not only trip themselves up, but they can often affect a whole team or organization. People like the obstacle man, for example. Here's his story. This obstacle man worked in a large creative organization. He received this name because no matter what suggestion was advanced, his mind instantly latched onto all the possible obstacles in connection with it. One day, the directors of his firm were considering a project which involved considerable expense and some definite hazards, as well as possibilities for success. In a discussion of the venture, the obstacle man would frequently say, "Just a moment, let's consider the obstacles involved." Now, present at this meeting was another man who said very little, but who was greatly respected by his colleagues for his ability and achievements. After listening to the obstacle man's litany of objections, he finally asked, "Why do you constantly emphasize the obstacles in this proposition instead of the possibilities?" The obstacle man responded, "To be intelligent, one must always be realistic, and it is a fact that there are definite problems with this project. What attitude would you take toward these obstacles, may I ask?" The other man unhesitatingly replied, "What attitude would I take toward these obstacles? Why, I would just remove them, that's all, and then I would forget them." "But," said the obstacle man, "that's easier said than done. You say you would remove them and forget them. May I ask if you have any technique for doing this that the rest of us have never discovered?" A slow smile came over the face of the other man as he said, "My entire life removing obstacles, and I never saw one yet that couldn't be removed, provided you had enough faith and guts and were willing to work. Since you want to know how it's done, I'll show you." He then reached into his pocket and took a card out of his wallet. He shoved the card across the table and said, "There, read that. That's my formula. And don't give me a song and dance about how it won't work either. I know better from experience." The obstacle man picked up the card and, with a strange look on his face, read the words to himself. "Read them out loud," urged the other man. In a slow, dubious voice he read, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." The owner of the card put it back in his wallet and said, "I've lived a long time and have faced a lot of difficulties, but there is power in those words, actual power, and with it you can remove any obstacle." He said this with confidence, and everyone knew he meant it. He was, in fact, a remarkable man who had overcome many odds, and his successful track record spoke for itself. His positive attitude, plus the fact that he was not in any sense holier than thou, made his words convincing to the men around the table. At any rate, there was no more negative talk from the obstacle man or anyone else from then on. The project was put into operation, and despite risks and difficulties, it turned out successfully. Think of the winning mentality that sports champions cultivate. When a game seems to be going against them, they can't let discouragement creep in. They can't let negative thoughts dominate, or they will lose the power to win. To be a champion in your own arena, your mental and spiritual resources must be razor sharp with confidence. Now you may say, "But you don't know my circumstances. I'm in a different situation than anybody else, and I'm about as far down as a human being can get." Well, if that's true, and you're down as far as you can get, in that case, congratulations, for you're at the bottom, and the bottom is a wonderful place. The only place you can go from the bottom is up. On the other hand, it's hard to say you're in a situation that no one has ever encountered before. There is no such situation. Practically speaking, there are only a few human stories, and they've all been enacted before. This is a fact we must never forget. There are people in this world who have overcome every conceivable difficulty, even the most hopeless, even the one in which you now find yourself. There is always a way out. A wise old